from the season-long commitment and join us for all things daily fantasy sports. DraftKings Daily Drafts, the newest and hottest DFS deals, and all the best ball and DFS content you can handle. All right, let's dive headfirst into this episode.
Welcome, it's Brandon, aka FantasyFling on the FantasyFling DFS channel, and my boy Jameson here. We're going to talk a little bit of divisional round playoffs. 2-game, 4-game slate. We got it all. So welcome. How you doing, Jameson?
Doing pretty good. Just gearing up for hopefully what usually ends up being the best weekend out of the year football-wise. But I think we got some interesting matchups, and I'm actually looking forward to all of them. I think they all can be pretty competitive, and just a lot of different avenues and way to go about it. So I'm excited to break this DFS slate down.
Absolutely, man. I guess, without further ado, let's just kind of get right into it. Look at the game tiles real quick and, see what Vegas thinks is going to happen with these games, how they're going to play out. So we got, in fact, let me go to the main slate because I've been focusing on the Saturday only slate. As of right now, doing it slate by slate. But the Saturday only is Houston and Baltimore and Green Bay and San Francisco. So if you want to play that one, it's a 2-gamer, of course, and you got the 2 number 1 seeds in that one. So a lot of fireworks, but I think potentially the big fireworks game could be Tampa versus Detroit. This one could surprise a lot of people, and Vegas certainly thinks so. 49-point implied team total. Obviously, the highest implied team total on the slate is going to be Green Bay at San Francisco. San Francisco with that 30-point team total. The game total, 58.5. And, Tampa Bay and Detroit just behind it. And then the Buffalo and KC game. This game has given us some fireworks in years past. Jameson, I'm sure you remember the one 2 years ago in Kansas City.
Yep, where Bills should have won it, and then Leslie Frazier defense kind of lets Patrick Mahomes just kind of sneak in there, and they go to overtime. Josh Allen doesn't ever get the ball. They changed the playoff rules because of it. It just it's kind of different, just how different these teams are just from 2 years ago. We talked about offense then. They're scoring 30-plus points each, and now that's seems like this is the least interesting game out of the 4 for the divisional round.
I agree with you. I've actually bet the under in this game. I think there's a lot of scenarios where it hits the under. I don't expect it to be high scoring. And it's kind of surprising, right? This game, I think there's a wide range of outcomes in this game. And I think it could obviously, be what it was 2 years ago. But I also think, that's unlikely. If it plays out 100 times, maybe 10 times, that's what it is. But yeah, man, that's obviously the game with the new Mahomes and Peyton Manning, of course, rivalry. And then, Brady and Manning rivalry with Mahomes and Josh Allen. And then, we got these 2 teams here that no one really expects to go anywhere. But this game is going to give us fireworks, I think, because you have 2 teams with a pretty poor secondary. This game has shootout potential written all over it. Vegas seems to think so too. And then the other stories are the 2 young quarterbacks, Jameson. We got CJ Stroud that kind of surprised everyone last week. I kind of thought that might be how that game went, and that's how it went. But much tougher task this week going into Baltimore. They're not at home. Can CJ Stroud do it again? I don't know. How about same thing, Jordan Love went into Dallas, shocked the world. Can they do it again against San Francisco? What do you think?
Yeah, especially for both these teams, I think they're both like at least 9-point underdogs. I think both the games are pretty close. The Houston one, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out because I do believe in the Ravens. I just, I don't know. It's a different Ravens team than in the past. And I know they played week 1, but I mean, we've played, 19 weeks of football since then. So it's like, how different are these 2 teams? Marlon Humphrey is out for the Ravens, which I think is a boost to Nico Collins. I bet him over 5.5 receptions earlier this week. And then the Jordan Love game, they dared Dallas to run the football on him, and they didn't with Tony Pollard. I thought that CeeDee Lamb was in a prime spot against Joe Barry's defense. Didn't seem to be the case, but I do think that Kyle Shanahan will exploit Green Bay Packers defense this week, even if it gets into shootout potential. But I'm really looking forward. I think this is an Ayuk week. But I think the Jordan Love, and I think they're going to rely on Aaron Jones a little bit, and I think that they can, keep it fairly close for a little while.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's an IU week, and, looking at the ownership numbers, the field would agree with you. So, on the 2-game slate, Ayuk was getting like 58% of the ownership from what I'm seeing as far as projections. And on the 4-game slate, he's getting 18%. So a lot on the 2-gamer, a little more spread out on the 4-gamer. But still like top 10 in ownership. So I agree with you on that. I think it's just a discount of Debo. But I think overall takes, I agree with you on that one. But, let's kind of get into it, I guess, Jameson. Who are the quarterbacks that you like the most, on this 4-game slate that we have?
I hate to say this because I'm usually pretty particular. I think all of them are in play. I think all of them. You bring up Detroit and Tampa Bay. Both of them have really good run defenses. Detroit's was number 1 in the league against the run, and Tampa Bay with Vita Vea is like right up there with it. So they played earlier in the season. Jared Goff looked pretty good. They snapped the ball pretty quick, so Tampa Bay's defense couldn't get set. Todd Bowles does like the exotic blitzes and all that stuff, and Ben Johnson just didn't let that happen. So 49 team over under. I already bet the over earlier this week on this. So I like both of them. I think Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans can have a bounce back game, and then Jared Goff on the other side. I don't think these teams are really going to try to run the ball. I know that Detroit usually does, but I mean, when you're going up against a good run defense, and Jared Goff cooks at home, I just think, I just don't think that they're going to run the ball a whole lot. And then Brock Purdy sets up really nice against the Green Bay Packers defense, and on the other side, we've seen Jordan Love cook the last month and a half. So as far as the favorites go, honestly, for me, I think it's Brock Purdy. I think he's in the best matchup out of all of them. I'm really going to take shots on all of them. The only guy I'm not really interested in is, as weird as it sounds, Patrick Mahomes.
I was just going to say that. I feel like I'm going to get burned. I'm going to get torched for this eventually. But I agree with you 100%.
But and then Josh Allen going against the Chiefs defense kind of spells some problems. I think they're all in play, and I think I kind of want to mix and match. Like I said, if I have a favorite, probably Brock Purdy. I think he's in the best spot, but I think Jared Goff would be a close second. And then I'm kind of torn on Lamar and CJ Stroud. I don't want to be underweight, but I just don't know how that game's going to go. It would not surprise me at all if the Texans snuck this out. I can't tell if this is like a different Ravens team from 2 years ago. They were the number 1 seed. Lamar had the MVP year, and they had like the first round bye, and they ended up losing to the Titans. So I'm a little cautious, I guess. But honestly, all these guys are in prime spots.
Yeah, man. I agree with pretty much everything you said there. The over on Detroit and Tampa, I love that because the metrics that I've been looking at, like these teams are both below average in the secondary. We're talking both of these teams are given above 27 yards above average, in the past game. So this game to me has shootout potential, and I like that. And specifically because both of these quarterbacks are cheap, and anytime you get value quarterbacks and you get shootout potential, I just love that because then you can afford Christian McCaffrey, you can afford Travis Kelce, you can afford all these expensive guys, Nico Collins, and you got cheap stacking options, of course, and both Baker and Jared Goff are not getting a lot of ownership. Now, I will say, Jameson, from what I'm seeing, the field kind of agrees with you. Is just kind of play everyone. The highest ownership I'm seeing right now in this 4-game slate is Lamar Jackson at 17%. He's my favorite play on the slate, but that is not a lot of ownership for a 4-game slate. So it's pretty flat across the board with Jordan Love and CJ Stroud getting the least amount of ownership. And I totally agree with that. And also we have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks with above a 3 fantasy points per dollar projection via DFS Army's projections right now. So that's really good. And that explains all the ownership where it is being flat because there's just several really good spots. And by the way, to get access to these projections that are very accurate and help, we just had a guy take down the mini max last week. Each and every week, takedowns of DFS Army. If you want access to all these tools, the coach's notes, the optimizer, use code FantasyFling for 10% off the VIP subscription. I will say my rundown of the quarterbacks that I like from kind of top to bottom here, Jameson. I like Lamar Jackson the most. I just think going against that Houston secondary that's really just been quite bad, giving up 38 yards above average. Lamar for me is number 1. And then after that, I'm with you on Brock Purdy. They have a 30-point implied team total, and we've seen him get there multiple times because Christian McCaffrey is obviously a receiving option. Deebo Samuel's a receiving option. Ayuk's a receiving option. George Kittle. Their offense is just so explosive. So I would go Lamar, Purdy, Allen. I do think that game is going to be lower scoring, but Allen could, like we saw last week, he can run for 50, 60 yards. So, he just has the highest rushing upside next to Lamar. And then, it's Goff and Baker Mayfield. And then from there, it'd probably be Mahomes, Jordan Love, and CJ Stroud.
Yeah. Especially, I know you're a DraftKings guy, and I'm playing mostly on FanDuel. It's a little different. The top is the same, but the lowest guy on FanDuel is CJ Stroud. If you're somebody who's trying to stack CMC, it gets very expensive. The high-end wide receivers, which there's a lot of them. Got no problem at all playing CJ Stroud. And over on DraftKings, the lowest guy is Mayfield and Jordan Love and Goff. Have no problem going there because these guys can all have 20-point floors. And I think that's all viable this week. So, like I said, we're both on the same page with Patrick Mahomes. He just hasn't had it all year long. It's not personal. Last 5 games, 18, 12, 17, 17, 14. It's just not.
It's mainly his receivers, right? It's you put the ball out in front of Mecole Hardman, and he doesn't even try to it's right in front of him. He doesn't dive for it. He's just no, I can't get there.
Right. So I think that's about it. Like I said, I really this Texans Ravens game, I'm just going to be honest, I really don't have a great feel on how it's going to go. I think the Ravens are favored by 9 points. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a low scoring, Texans kind of hang around and then the Ravens just kind of pull away late, or an upset. I wouldn't be surprised by that either.
Yeah. And I love CJ Stroud, and I kind of called the upset last week. I said they're at home, and we've seen lesser quarterbacks come out in a home game. The crowd's excited, and and they kind of put a beating on the other team. But a lot of that for me was Joe Flacco. I just didn't think the Joe Flacco story was going to end with him hosting a Lombardi, and it's a little different now, man. They're going on the road facing a really good defense that's at home. And and there's a really good quarterback on the other side of it as well. So, I think it's going to be a much tougher matchup for Stroud this week. But, he has played incredibly well for his rookie season. So can he do it one more week? We'll see. I'll tell you, though, I have a little bit more faith in Jordan Love because the San Francisco secondary, if there's one weakness in San Francisco, It is that secondary, and he has his full plethora of weapons. He's got Watson, he's got Romeo Dobbs, he's got Jaden Reed, Wicks. He's got Aaron Jones to throw to out of the backfield. So we'll see. But
absolutely. We
talk
get
about
into running backs here. There we go. So just right at the top, Christian McCaffrey. Over on FanDuel, he's 10,800, a little bit cheaper than his $11K price that he was hitting like week 16, 17. Over on DraftKings, he's 8,800. This is the absolute prime spot for him. He's going to be very high owned, I think. Especially if you're playing cash this week, I think you have to find a way to get him in there. Tournaments, it's a little different. And then just some other guys that I like at the running back position. Aaron Jones. I think if the Green Bay Packers have any chance of winning, it'd be riding Aaron Jones. San Francisco has been able to give up the run a little bit. The problem is a lot of these teams that they play just can't stick around, so they got to abandon it pretty quick.
Right.
Another guy, James Cook. I think, Ladarius Sneed in the secondary for the Chiefs, I think if they're going to try to beat Kansas City, it'd be behind James Cook, who's had a monster workload. And then one other person I do want to point out that's probably the cheapest out of all of them, at least on FanDuel, is Devin Singletary. Last month of the season, the Ravens gave up 400-yard games to running backs. He's the lone man there with no Dameon Pierce. I mean, Dameon Pierce is just about kicked out in the Texans running back rotation. So those are some of my favorite running back plays.
I love it. Christian McCaffrey for me. So like on the 2-game slate, he's getting 70% projected ownership, and I ran optimals earlier, and it was giving me like 90% Christian McCaffrey, and I'm totally fine with it. I'm struggling to see a scenario where he, specifically on the 2-game slate, where he doesn't end up in the winning lineup. Like, I think unless he gets hurt, like he's in the winning lineup. Just, going against, I mean, he has the best matchup on paper. He's the best running back in the game. He had 2 weeks to rest. So, going against Green Bay, which, they give up almost 15 yards above average to the running back position. So, I mean, even on FanDuel where he's 10-8, I still like it. And he's projecting by far, he has the best projection and top fantasy points per dollar play. On DraftKings, I think really 8,800 is cheap. We've seen him, above 9K. So on DraftKings, he's a lock. FanDuel, you think about it a little more, but I still love it. And then, I really like the James Cook call. I also like the Pacheco call. Like, I think that game, really the best way for either of those teams to win is to really have a healthy combination of running the ball and passing the ball. Keep Mahomes off the field, keep Josh Allen off the field. I expect both of those teams to run the ball. And then, I really like Singletary a lot as well, because same thing. If you want to go into, you're not going to win a shootout on the road. It's like the old school coach saying, you don't get into shootouts on the road. Unless, Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, or a level like that. I think the best way for Houston to have any chance of going into Baltimore and winning is riding Devin Singletary. So, and it's a pretty decent matchup. They're just slightly above average.
Right. Some guys we didn't talk about. We talked about earlier the matchups being pretty bad. Rachaad White, I know the workload has been nice all season long.
Yeah.
If he's going to get there to be catching passes out of the backfield, just because the Lions have been really good against the run. And then both Detroit running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
I think Montgomery could get there just as the goal line back. He falls into the end zone, but he doesn't necessarily get the yards. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, everybody kind of thinks of him as like a receiving back. Like that's all he does. But, he's been pretty efficient running the ball, but I just don't think it's a great matchup for him. But I do think those running backs are some GPP plays in my book. And then the only other guy or starter we didn't talk about is Gus Edwards, who's kind of the wild card.
Yeah. It's interesting because he's been splitting with Justice Hill like a lot lately. However, Gus Edwards will get the goal line carries. And, we've seen several times this year, he'll run 2 in. He even ran 3 in 1 week.
Yep.
So I will say I would not normally on smaller slates, I will play a quarterback and running back together. But with the exception of Gus Edwards and Lamar Jackson, I will not play those two together because they do not correlate well together at all.
No.
Yeah.
I agree there. And as far as there's really no cheap options, like there's not any backups. The only person I would say would be A.J. Dillon, but I think he's trending towards out.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Matt LaFleur just can't quit A.J. Dillon. But the rest of these guys, there's really not much of a path, I don't think. Outside of just absolute random variance. There's just no need to get that cute.
I agree. Well, heck, let's move on to wide receivers because we got a lot of those to talk about, that's for sure. So yeah. I'll let you kind of start it out. Let's kind of do this in a few different ways. Who are the top guys that you're targeting? Because, there's a large group of them, and then kind of your mid-range guys, and then, who's a guy that you can see, one of the cheapos, because it's always obviously going to be one of these, 3 to 5K wide receivers that really can break the slate, win you the GPP.
Yep. So starting at the top, like I said earlier, most of these guys are in really good matchups. So Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against the Bucs secondary. Really digging Nico Collins. I know it's not the best matchup, but Marlon Humphrey's out. And if the Texans are going to win, CJ Stroud's going to have to rely on him. I mean, he's been just a ball hawk. He's been averaging over 14 points a game. Both Debo and Ayuk, I said I thought it'd be Ayuk week, but we could see them both get there. But it gets really expensive really quick with them. And then the other top guy for me would be Mike Evans. I know he didn't do well last week when he should have against the Eagles secondary. I think this is a bounce back spot. I think this is a monster 2-touchdown type game for Mike Evans going up if that's going up against Detroit. So those are my favorite expensive plays. The mid tier, Jaden Reed outside of last week's been really good. Been getting before last week he scored touchdowns in 6 out of his last 7 games. Try to look here. Kind of interested in Odell Beckham Jr. I think that the Ravens have saved up him for the playoffs, not playing him full time, and I think they're ready to unleash him. And then I'm going to take some dart throws on Jameson Williams. The speed, I think he can get behind the Bucs secondary. All it takes is one with him, and then another guy that's pretty cheap that I will be into is Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, man. I love the Mike Evans call because to your point, it was Palmer and Moore last week, and and Godwin, and it's like, well, what happened to Mike Evans? And this is a premier matchup, like we've talked about. This game has shootout potential, and give me some Mike Evans. I love it. He's projected for 20% ownership, which on a 4-game slate, that's not high. And so I love him. We know what ceiling he has, of course. I will say Nico Collins, for me, that is a guy that I'm going to be playing on the 2-game slate, but I'm probably going to fade him more or less on the 4-game slate, just given the matchup. I think he has a tougher path there. And from what I'm seeing right now, he's second most in ownership. So I think it's a good leverage spot. He's coming in at 26% projected ownership. Amon-Ra, I love Amon-Ra. He's got the highest receiving yards out of any of these wide receivers, over 1,600 on the season. He's number 2 in targets. He's right up there with Stephon Diggs. So, he's consistently getting almost 10 targets a game. So I love Amon-Ra. And like I said, fade Nico a little bit. Rashee Rice has really established himself as the number 1 wide receiver in Buffalo. So I love him. I will fade Diggs in this spot. I'm sorry, Rashee Rice established himself as the number 1 wide receiver in Kansas City going against Buffalo. I will fade Diggs because the Chiefs, I mean, their secondary has just been elite, and Diggs has been a disappointment for a while. So at his price, yeah, that's a fade for me. And that's pretty much it. You know, I like some Debo. Debo, from on the 2-game slate, he was coming in pretty low owned. What is his projection ownership wise? 11% on the 4-gamer. So he's it's crazy because he's priced above Brandon Ayuk by $900 or $800. And it's interesting because Ayuk has more receptions, more yards, and more fantasy points per game on DraftKings than Debo. But yet Debo is $800 more. So that said, Debo does have the higher ceiling, I think. And we've seen him hit that ceiling a little bit more. He's just a little more variant. But yeah, I think you got to get Ayuk, you got to get Debo, you got to get a lot of exposure to both of these guys, and you just know that it's typically going to be one of them that goes off on the slate. So, those are the 2 most expensive guys from San Francisco, and that's pretty much going to finish it for me for the expensive guys. Some mid-tier guys that I do like, obviously Godwin. We've seen him ever since his hot wife complained that he wasn't getting enough targets. Apparently the coach has a crush on his wife because the coach listened to his wife and started giving Chris Godwin a bunch more targets. So I think he's underpriced relative to his role at 6,300. I like him.
Yeah.
And
he's,
go ahead.
Like you said, he's been cooking the last month or so.
Yeah.
So I was going to, I think, like I said, where you're going to win your money this week is wide receiver. And it's just kind of mixing and matching the right guys. A couple more guys I just want to point out real quick. Dontavian Wicks has been really good over on FanDuel. He's 5,700. I mean, that's really cheap. Last 4 games, 9, 21, 9, and 12. For 5,700, I mean, you're really paying off salary there. Another guy I want to point out, Mecole Hardman at 4,800 on FanDuel. Mahomes tried a couple times last week, and then the week before, I mean, he had 11 targets. So they're trying their best. Just kind of these cheap guys. Like I said, I think this is where you're going to win. The guy we didn't talk about, Zay Flowers. We'll see about Mark Andrews, which we'll get into that in a minute if he plays. If he doesn't, sets up nicely for Zay Flowers, who's had 18 and 17 points the last 2 weeks. Excuse me. And then kind of a wild card, Christian Watson. We haven't seen him play in a while, but he's got the big game ability. Last time he played in December, he scored 24 points. So on FanDuel, where he's 5,800, I mean, that's pretty good if you're willing to take that risk.
Absolutely. I'm with you on Zay Flowers. Is kind of my mid-range flag plant for sure. He's healthy. He's projected in this one to play. As far as some of the cheap guys, and I'm with you. And specifically when I go to cheap guys, I want guys with upside, ceiling. It was David Bell for me last week. We talked about him, with Cedric Tillman out. And he ended up being in the nuts. Another guy, I love the Christian Watson call because he's a guy that he's a deep threat. He has 2 touchdown upside, and that's exactly what we want. He's 4K, 4,200, whatever it is. And if he catches a couple touchdowns, he's going to win you the tournament. Khalil Shakir, if there's no Gabe Davis, we saw it last week, was all over him, and we'll be back on him again in this spot if there's no Gabe Davis. If there is Gabe Davis, I'm interested in playing Gabe Davis. One thing that was interesting to me, and I think this is just like an example of how sharp the field has gotten. Romeo Dobbs had a big week last week, right? Jaden Reed put up a donut, a 0. Like I had GPP winning upside lineups. Like I placed like 20th out of like 11,000. I think it was Jaden Reed in that lineup put up a 0. So like I was so pissed.
Yep.
But most of the time, it used to be that people would chase the recency bias and they would go to Romeo Dobbs, and then Jaden Reed would come in low ownership. I'm actually seeing Jaden Reed having higher ownership than Dobbs because people are sharp and they know they're like, whatever happened last week, fade that and go back to what, is typically going to happen. So keep that in mind. If that holds and Romeo Dobbs is at low ownership, I will actually go back to that because I think he showed a lot last week.
Yeah. It just Fields definitely got a lot sharper. Same thing with like Mike Evans. In the past, you burned me once, like, oh no, we're done. You got to prove it to me. It's not how you win money. And
No.
Detroit 32nd ranked secondary. I mean, I get your point there. So I think that is about it for wide receivers, at least on my end, unless you have any more. The only other person I'd point out, Nelson Aguilar, if he catches a bomb. But other than that, that's really about it for wide receivers for me.
Yeah, I played, like, for example, Green Bay, they have so many wide receivers. I think I would just get exposure to get 5 to 10% exposure if you're playing 150 to Jaden Reed, to Wicks, to Watson, to Dobbs. Play a few of these guys. The Beckham call, I loved the Beckham call because to your point, we saw him get things going in the middle of the season. And then after like week 14, he just like fell off a cliff. And I agree with you. I think they're trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs. And remember when the Rams a couple years ago made their Super Bowl run? He was a big part of it before he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so I expect that, especially if Mark Andrews is out, which I'm not sure if we will find that out until probably game day. So just keep an eye out on that one. Yeah,
and they did say that he was iffy to play. So you got to think that even if he does play, he might not be, the Mark Andrews that we remember before he hurt himself. They might think that they can get past Houston without Mark Andrews, playing 90% of the snaps. So who knows? I mean, just like last week with Sam Laporta, he was on the field and he caught a touchdown, but he really wasn't involved.
Right. It says here we'll find out by tomorrow. He's got to be activated from IR by 3:00 Central. So we'll find out before then if he's available.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of finish this out with tight ends and defenses. And, as we're talking about Mark Andrews a little bit, obviously we would love Isaiah Likely if we get no Mark Andrews. And, that said, the fact that Mark Andrews is projected to play, he's getting 15% ownership. You're getting Isaiah Likely as a contrarian play, 2% projected ownership via DFS Army. So it could be a contrarian play who ends up maybe seeing more work than Mark Andrews. You never know. But Jameson, who do you like for tight end in this game and this 4-game slate?
Probably my favorite play. I will always play George Kittle. I just can't quit it. I just think he's got the highest ceiling out of all these tight ends, especially with how Travis Kelce's year's gone. I know Laporta caught a touchdown last week, but I mean, 3 targets for 14 yards. I just don't think he's wearing a big brace on his knee. I just don't think he's healthy enough to hit the ceiling. I could be wrong. But really, George Kittle, Dalton Kincaid, a guy I like a lot. And then I'll be playing a little bit of Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Those are my favorite plays. And then likely if Mark Andrews is out. And I think probably not going to play a whole lot of Kelce. I'm not playing a whole lot of Laporta. And I probably won't play a lot of Andrews either, even if he gets activated. The only other person I left off is Dalton Schultz, and I think I'd rather be playing Nico Collins personally. But that's me.
Yeah, man. I think there's a lot of viable tight ends, so definitely a double tight end slate again for me. I love Kelsey just because Kelsey was 7K, 7,500, and now he's 6K and he's averaging 15 points a game. And honestly, he dropped a couple last week. I think maybe the weather had something to do with it. But, he still had like 70 yards. He would have had well over 100 yards, would have hit the bonus. So I like Kelsey in this spot. I like Kittle. I agree that as well. Cade Otton's look good. Kincaid should have broke the slate last week. Should have won me a lot of money. He had dropped that second touchdown, and it was really just a really good defensive play, But he's been – the offense has been better this year when they involve Kincaid. And, yeah, some of the value guys like Tucker Kraft, Musgrave, and I actually really like Schultz this week with no Noah Brown. I expect Baltimore to focus on Nico Collins a lot. So Dalton Schultz at 4,400. Yeah, I love that play.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see if people chase the Cade Otton production outside of last week. Really hasn't done it all year long. I'm not too interested in that. Dawson Knox has caught a couple touchdowns since his return. But, I mean, it's still been the Dalton Kincaid show. Musgrave had the wide open touchdown. I would lean Tucker Kraft. That's just my preference. He's a little cheaper over on FanDuel at 4,800. Yeah. Like I said, if you're playing Christian McCaffrey, you're probably going to have to punt at tight end. So I think Tucker Kraft would be the best play there. Like
I said, last week I had the Monday game. I had the 2-gamer. I had a freaking Josh Allen double stack with Dawson Knox and Kincaid, and they both caught a touchdown, early. And I was like top 5 in a large field GPP, and then I ended up finishing like 100th, But for a while,
sounds about right.
I was like the double tight end on the same team. What you know about that?
So I think that that's about it for tight end for me there. I'm not going to go any farther than probably Musgrave or Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, I think there's just too much good value at wide receiver to play any of those backups. But yeah, man. So, going over to defense, I think the obvious defense plays, the two most obvious would be the San Francisco 49ers as heavy favorites, almost 10-point favorites against the Green Bay Packers. So, you want to play a defense, a team that's a heavy favorite, play that defense specifically when at home. And then, also Baltimore going against Houston at home as well. And really they're only 2,900. So quite cheap, but the one thing I'll say, and specifically when you've got 8 good teams, I think you kind of just want to get a little bit of exposure to all of them. The one other defense that really stands out for me is Detroit at home going against Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think in a lot of ways, everyone expected Detroit to be here, but no one expected Tampa to be there. And I could totally see Tampa just going in and get smoked. Even though I think it's probably going to be a high-scoring game and maybe a shootout, I could see that scenario where they go in and they just get smoked.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. The contrarian part of that, over on FanDuel, the Bucs are 3rd cheapest. They send the blitz more than probably any other team in the NFL. If you're just trying to get some sacks, I don't hate playing the Buccaneers, even if, they score a lot of points. If they get sacks and just when you're punting, as long as they don't bury you, I'm totally okay with that. I know Lions have good offensive line, but just kind of going to mix and match. Chiefs defense is only 3,800 on FanDuel. That's fairly cheap. Been really good all year. Buffalo's 4K. I know they're missing a lot of pieces. But I'm just going to try to mix and match. I'm not going to pay up for the 49ers defense at 4,500. And Detroit Lions over on FanDuel, second most expensive at 4,400. So it's just going to kind of mix or match. Like I said, I don't think any defense outside of like the Chiefs and Bills game is in like a great spot. There's just a lot of high power offenses throughout this entire postseason, the divisional round.
Yeah, I agree. And, sometimes even I think last week you saw 4 players against defense. So that's something to keep in mind. A team could still get there. Like, I think in the Nuts lineup was Dak, and it had potentially like +3, and it was against Green Bay's defense, which also had was it 1 or 2 pick sixes? So keep in mind on these small slates, allow players versus defense, at least 2, maybe 3, and be willing to play, 2 running backs from the same game. Be willing to play a quarterback with the running back, and players versus defense. So keep that all in mind. But Jameson, any last thoughts on the slate?
I don't think so. Really looking forward to this weekend. It ends up being usually the best weekend of the year as far as the playoffs go. We've got all the high-powered offenses. I mean, it's kind of crazy that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs is probably the least, sexy offense in the playoffs with the 8 teams left. Just kind of wild to think about, but just really looking forward to it. I think I'm going to play it pretty chalky. I don't think I have any wild upsets. I think the Bills beat the Chiefs, but other than that, they're a favorite anyway. So yeah, I just think San Francisco squeaks it out. I think Baltimore squeaks it out, but I think they're both going to be closer than people think, the 9-point totals. And then said the Lions beat the Bucks, Bills beat the Chiefs, and, kind of move our way there. So
I hope the Bills beat the Chiefs. I'm a Broncos fan. You're a Chargers fan. We hate the Chiefs. Go Bills.
Tired of it.
Sick of it. They shouldn't have won last year. It's terrible. But yeah, I would love to see the Bills win. I would love to see the Lions win. I root for those teams that have, just had so much heartbreak, and they both got good teams. So I'd love to see them win. That said, though, I'm just excited for a weekend of football. I agree with you. The divisional round is great. And, just overall thoughts, typically what you think is going to happen from watching the entire season, that's what happens in the divisional round more times than not. Teams lean on their studs. So I wouldn't go too off the wall with it, specifically if you're playing the 4-gamer, one pivot, one lone guy. But, lean on the studs. So,
yeah. The only last thing I will say, it's going to sound very off the wall. I would not be surprised if 49ers lost this week. Not really calling the upset, but I just think 9 points is a little disrespectful for how hot the Packers has been, how good Jordan Love's been. 49ers defense is, I know they got some guys on the defensive line, but I would not be surprised we see this happen every once in a while, like the ultra mega chalk. Everybody loves the 49ers. Like all your one and done leagues, everybody's just saving the 49ers for the Super Bowl, and then, some wrench gets thrown in there. So I'm not calling the upset. I just think that game's going to be a little closer than people think.
Okay. I like it. I would be stunned if the 49ers lost. I would be less stunned if the Ravens lost, just because there's something about CJ Stroud that he just feels like he's going to be the next elite quarterback. But
I think, like I said, I'm not predicting it. I just we have these 2 games with 9-point favorites, and I just think these games are going to be closer. The Packers are a really hot football team. I hate the Joe Barry defense, but it's been decent in the playoffs the last couple of years. It's kind of the reason why he's kept his job. I don't know, man. It's just always rooting for chaos, but I think that's about it for me.
I like it. Hey, man, crazy things have happened. We've seen teams go on a run. I've witnessed firsthand the Joe Flacco-led Ravens came into Mile High after the Broncos had smoked them earlier in the regular season, and they beat the Broncos in double overtime. Things happen. Teams go on runs, and sometimes it it ends in a Super Bowl. Sometimes it doesn't, but it'll happen. So who knows who's going to get upset this week? We saw 2 last week. Maybe it'll continue. Maybe it won't. But stay tuned. We will be back next week. We'll recap it and look ahead to the conference championships. So best of luck, Jameson. Hope you win some money. And, anyone watching, hope you win money as well. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.
You guys have a good one.
Later, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to smash that like button and subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next. We really appreciate it. And we'll catch you